Hello, Indra. It's a real pleasure to be talking to you today as part of the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women's Entrepreneurs Mean Business Summit. So thank you for being part of it today. I have to say I'm a bit of a fangirl. I've admired you from afar for a really long time, and I'm extraordinarily pleased and proud to be taking part in this today.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for having me. I'm a big admirer of Cherie Blair and everything she's doing. So it's a great privilege to chat with you. Thank you for inviting me on this.
So, for those of you who don't know Indra, she has been consistently ranked as among the world's number one most powerful women. She's the former chairperson and chief executive officer of PepsiCo. She currently serves on the boards of Amazon, the International Cricket Council, and Philips. And her new book, My Life in Full: Work, Family, and Our Future, has just been published. And we're delighted that you'll be sharing this with us, with your new book in this interview. So, Indra, to open this today in the summit, which is focused on women's entrepreneurs and tackling gender stereotypes, I'd like to ask you the straight questions about gender stereotyping, the type that you've seen and experienced in your career. And I just wondered if you could share a couple of your finest moments in your journey to success, the big ones and the small ones, and in terms of what you've had to overcome in terms of gender stereotyping.
Now, I came into the workforce many, many years ago, 40, 45 years ago. And so life was very different. There weren't too many women in the workforce. In fact, in most cases, I was the only woman. And I had no woman peer, I had no woman boss. And so I had to sort of establish women as people who can be in seats of power, who can be in the room where big decisions are being made. So I had to work my way to being accepted, to being viewed as credible, and being viewed as a contributor. And everything I said or did was compounded by the fact that not only was I a woman, I was also an immigrant person of color. So I had three strikes against me, if you want to call it that. And I must say, though, while all of those issues persisted, I wouldn't say issues, realities. I think the flip side is that there were people who leaned in to say, hey, I've seen something in her that says that she's going to go places, maybe, but I want to lean in and be a supporter and a promoter. So a lot of men leaned in to be supporters and promoters. But along the way, I did face a lot of issues that sort of hurt when people talked over me or rolled their eyes when I talked, or always said that when I talked, I was saying things that were too theoretical. But when a man said the same thing, it was very insightful and practical. You put up with that for a little while because that's what people who are pioneers and who are trying to break traditional molds have to do for a short while. But once I realized I could find my voice, I put an end to all that. And so it was tough being among the early pioneers. But I must say, once you've really arrived, you can challenge status quo and say, cut that out. And now with more women entering the workforce, with more people around the table who look different, I think all these bad behaviors need to be called out.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that will really make a difference to the kind of atmosphere that you find in those boardrooms and in those meetings where there are more of us saying, actually, that's not okay. This is how we should be behaving. Thank
And
you.
I think the other thing, too, we have to be careful about is people want to change. Many people want to change. So a lot of what they do is more unconscious because that's what they're used to doing. So I think it's how do you give them real time feedback to change as opposed to waiting a long time after the incident. And then it becomes he said, she said, as opposed to you behave badly. Don't let it happen again.
And they're mimicking the behaviours they've seen before with
That's
people who've been
exactly right.
successful.
Exactly.
If you define success in a particular way. Yeah.
That's a great point, Tanya, right?
One of the things your book's fascinating, and anyone who hasn't read it should go out and read it. There was a particular incident in the book where you talk about your mother in particular, her response to when your sister got an opportunity. And it was really interesting because use a really lovely analogy about your mum being a foot on the accelerator and on the brake when it came to women's equality. And it really chimed not just with my own personal experiences, but some of the research that we've had at the foundation, that we can see sometimes mothers and the women around us can be the least encouraging when it comes to the idea of starting your own business or taking a leap into the future. And I just wondered if you could tell us more about what that story represents for you and how it's influenced your perspective.
It's like my mother was a person who grew up in a certain society, and society expected her to treat and bring her daughters up a certain way. Yeah, like, let them get educated, but not too much education. Let them have some freedom, but not too much. Make sure you put the appropriate guardrails around them. Make sure at 18 you get them married off. Make sure they know how to do the housework. Make sure they have very good wives. That's what society expected of her. Yet for herself, she wished she had gone to college. She wished she had so dreamed. And then I had my father and grandfather saying, hey, we have daughters and one son. Let them all do whatever they want. As long as they want to study, let's give them the opportunity to study as much as they want. If they want to work, let's allow them to do it. We are not going to constrain you girls because of your gender. So deep down inside, my mother is feeling excited about it because that's what she would have liked for herself. That's the accelerator. But then society said, oh, you'll be viewed as a bad mom if you didn't, bring up your girls a certain way. And she was worried about that too because we have to live in that society, remember? So she had one foot on the brake, but three legs on the accelerator because my grandfather, my father, and her all had one foot on the accelerator. So, there were all of those conflicts in day to day life. Oh, girls don't do that. I am going to do that, mom. I'm going to climb the tree. I want to pluck the guavas. Girls don't climb trees. Girls don't play cricket. Girls don't play the guitar. Well, I'm going to. What's wrong with it? I'm not violating any rule. I'm playing it at home. What's wrong with that? So, little by little, we broke down the barriers and she allowed us to. So I liked the frame that she gave us. I liked the freedom within the frame. And I like the fact that discipline at home helped me anchor myself. But then with that anchor, I could also soar.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there's an element of also wanting to protect you?
Sure.
Because, from some of the disappointments that she may have felt in her life and that she will have seen from the women around her, I know that I'm deeply conscious that when I talk to the young women in my life, I'm saying to them, you need to work twice as hard, three times as hard as the men. But I feel like, is that stifling their ambition? But I do want to protect them from the realities of being in a workplace, in an environment which is dominated by men still.
The good news, Tanya, in our time, at least in my time, and I'm, much older generation, women had to work two or three times harder than men to make it because we were not viewed as credible. I think in today's world, uh, you know, women still have to work a bit harder, but not that much harder. But you have to work smarter. You've got to work to show how you can add value to whatever you're doing. So the world is getting better. I'm optimistic. Let me put it that way. But now, as a sisterhood, the women have to get together and make sure that they keep this journey progressing as opposed to regressing in any shape or form.
Yeah. Um, in your book, you describe how gender bias operates, and it's not one thing. It's not a single thing that we can just solve that, but actually many, many, many things. Some of them
Yeah.
really small, and some of them big structural issues. And again, it's very similar to the findings that we see in our research around women entrepreneurs, particularly in middle and low income countries where we work. That there are multiple iterations of how we see gender bias showing up. And there, as a result, there's no single silver bullet that's going to resolve all of this. And I just wanted to get your perspective on how we can tackle, how when there isn't a single, the enemy isn't one single enemy. It's not one single thing. How do we tackle gender stereotypes when it is so deep rooted and it is so multifactorial?
I believe every issue we have in the world is multifactorial. They're all complex. And I think several things help. Numbers, when we have more women graduating, when we have more women entering the workforce, numbers help. But the numbers can't be silent. They should also speak up when they think things are not going right, and they're sensing that there's any bad behavior or uneven behavior in the workplace. They should stand up and be counted. I think things like pay parity, unconscious bias, they shouldn't exist. So people should speak up when they happen. People should constructively have conversations with HR or your bosses to talk about how to right those wrongs. So I think we owe it to ourselves to speak up. At the same time, we are a source of talent. We're getting all the college degrees in larger numbers. We're getting our GPA is higher than many of the men's GPAs. And so I think people should look at us as a potent talent base for the workforce, as opposed to, oh my God, do I have to hire women? In a world where there's a war for talent, if you don't bring in the best and the brightest, how do you make it work? And today, women represent a fantastic talent pool. So I think we have to demonstrate to people that don't think of it as you're doing us a favor. You're doing it to keep your company successful. You're doing it to keep the economy successful. You need the best talent, and we represent the best talent that's graduating from colleges today. So I think that people think hiring more like them leads to better decision making. I think it leads to easier decision making, but not necessarily result in better decisions. Because when you have diversity around the boardroom, you get better decisions. Okay, it might take a little bit more chatting and discussing, but that's what leads to better decisions, and people have to understand that.
Mm-hmm. And I also think that, it's a point worth repeating that the changes that employers, workplaces need to make themselves attractive and good workplaces for women
Yeah,
also help men.
yeah,
So
totally.
if there are things around good childcare, access to good healthcare, all of those things are good for men. They're good for all of us. You're not favouring women in particular. That you're supporting everybody in doing that.
I think it helps family builders, and we need families, we need kids. Okay, so it helps family builders. I think it starts with both people in a family relationship to say the kids are our joint responsibility. It can't be just the responsibility of the female. The family is a responsibility of both parents or whoever's in the relationship. Because if you start with that basic premise, then you think about all of these policies very differently than if you say, hey, it's a woman's problem. Why should we care about it? Which used to be the way people thought about families and kids. Slowly they're changing their thinking because they realize that a lot of the economy runs on the backs of women.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about what you've talked in the book about what you say when people say to you, so how did you do it? I mean, you're extraordinarily accomplished. You've run one of the biggest companies in the world. It's really complex. And you say one of the things that enabled your journey and your success has been having the support of mentors at critical moments. Mentoring is a really, really big and important part of what we do at the foundation in supporting our women entrepreneurs. I just wondered if you could spend a little time telling us about how mentors have shaped your journey to success.
I'm a product of my mentorship. And it's always been men through my life because there were no women bosses, or there were not enough women around me to mentor me. But I want to be very clear: mentors pick you, you don't pick them. They pick you because they see something in you that they say, hey, I like what I see in Tanya. She should go places. Let me see how I can nudge her to go places, because when she goes places, I can sit back and say, I had a part to play in getting her there. So, mentors, by definition, are unselfish. They promote, support the people they choose to mentor. And mentors are, by definition, not insecure. They're very secure and they want to see you thrive. Mentors don't just give advice, they push you, they promote you, they support you when you fall, they play an outsized role in your life. At least they did in mine. And mentorship is a two-way relationship. If somebody you know is your mentor, supporter, a promoter, make sure you give them respect. Make sure you dialogue with them constantly. And if you don't take their advice, make sure you tell them why you didn't take their advice. Very, very important.
And I love the fact you've talked about the benefits of being the mentor, because I think very often it's clear why you would want to have a mentor,
Hmm.
but being a mentor is it can be incredibly rewarding. And I mean, it's some of it's very, very selfish, right? It's that feeling of pride where you see someone that you have you have mentored be successful. You know, that
But
is a
Tanya, requires them to be secure because
yeah,
sometimes your mentee might go above you, in which case you shouldn't feel threatened. Rather, you should feel the sense of pride that you had a big hand in helping them get to where they did.
yeah, and that you've helped shape their vision and their type of leadership, and all those are
Exactly right.
things that we should all be anxious to share and to be part of, I think.
It's exactly right.
Um, we'd really like to hear more about the vision of your book in building on all that you said about the future of work and how that can support women's economic empowerment.
So I look at women and say, look, you're first a great talent pool. You're getting educated, you're hungry, you want economic freedom, you want the power of the purse. We love it all, which means that you're motivated to go out there and engage in paid work in any shape or form. At the same time, we also want families, we also want kids. It's healthy for the economy to have young people to pay into our pension systems to help take care of the aging. It's a cycle. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't support women and young family builders and being able to go into paid work, whether it's an entrepreneurship or working for a community organization or the government or companies, I don't care. If we don't support you to do those jobs through things like paid leave, flexible work hours, childcare support, how can you juggle 4 or 5 jobs at the same time and still remain sane? That's the question. Um, I don't think we should put so much of a burden on women that the stress level breaks them down. Women are human beings too. And nobody said that they should carry a disproportionate amount of the burden. So, all that the book is asking for is, hey, let's talk sensibly about support for these young family builders and for this talent pool called women. Let's make sure they all have paid leave when they have children or they have an illness in a family. And I know the UK has paid leave. Let's make sure that there's flexibility in their job. The wonderful thing about COVID is that, at least for the white collar workers, it showed that you could work with flexibility and technology tools have developed. Not the case with our essential workers. They still have to go into work. In which case, let's make sure we give them predictability in hours so they can plan their life. And the third is we have to have a care support structure built so that people have access to ubiquitously available, affordable, quality childcare. Because sometimes it's available but not very high quality. It's high quality but too expensive. It's got to be available, affordable, and high quality childcare. And if we don't provide that as a service quickly, Tanya, more and more women are going to leave the workforce because they just can't do it. They cannot juggle it all because they're constantly worried about dropping the ball somewhere or just collapsing themselves. So I think it's time that we took this very seriously and said, we need to care about those who care for us.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting, you know, I'm sitting here in London, in England, where we take for granted some of these things. We take for granted that we have access to free healthcare, that we have, I mean, we have free education, we have support systems that the state has helped to
Hmm.
put in place, and that makes a massive difference. We could still do more, but compared uh, to women, to family builders in so many countries, where they are having to depend on um, individuals in their own little networks to make those changes, to support them to do what they need to do, that it's too fragile, it's too unpredictable, and how can you possibly plan a family like that? How can
And
you possibly
there's no quality because what you're doing is you depend on a neighborhood network or multi-generational families depend on each other. They may not be educated, they're still taking care of your kids. It's difficult because what happens is when you don't invest in early childhood development, the kid is really not ready to enter school and thrive. So I think just as we worry about schooling for kids post the time they're 5, I think we should start worrying about 0 to 5.
Yeah.
Really launch kids the right way.
And that's in the interest of men and women. It's in the
Totally.
interest of everyone in society, whether you're a parent or not, that we have those foundations in place. Because, as an older person, as someone who's going to be relying on the younger generation, I need that. I need them. I need everyone to be thinking about the future and innovating. And we can't do that if in those first 5 years they've been deprived of that.
I think that's why we say it's about family, not female. Families. Let's talk about families, how to make families thrive.
Yeah. No. That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, and I think actually the pandemic it's been universally awful and terrible, and the impact will be felt for many, many years. But it has left us with an opportunity to think about how we come back, because we don't want to return to the state. We don't want the previous status quo. We need to build back better, which is a phrase that is bandied about a lot. And what do we mean by better? And for me, better is all about ensuring that we have a more gender equal economy across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be especially interested in your perspective about how big corporations can play a role in that. And, for example, in building inclusive leadership change, or making sure that small businesses, which particularly tend in many countries to be led by women, can be brought into those conversations to help build those to rebuild the economy that we're really going to need to help us get out of this.
I think big companies are making progress. Everybody's committed to some sort of a diversity and inclusion program to make sure the company gets more diverse. I think they'll bring the numbers in. They just have to change their behaviors, the environment in the company, to make it a lot more inclusive. Because diversity is numbers, inclusion is the mindset. The mindsets have to change, which takes a longer time. I think what I'm seeing today, Tanya, and you guys have more evidence of this, dazzling number of small businesses being started by women. Women are creating, like, you won't believe it. It's a golden time for women to create enterprises. The bigger challenge we have as small businesses, how do we provide mentorship to help them scale? How do we provide them access to funding? Because venture capital funding is still not available to women entrepreneurs as it is to men. I think 2.4% of Silicon Valley funding goes to women. That's very, very low. So the question is, how do you have more financing available for women entrepreneurs? And then how do you pool women entrepreneurs together to give them scale so that you can do their back office functions, so you can do their sort of drudgery function, so they can go off and do the customer facing, growing the business functions. So I think there's so much we can do when we pool together women entrepreneurs to say, how do we make you successful, but by creating backbone structures for you, and then training them to sell to big companies, teaching them how to call on big companies so that they don't give away too much of the value to the big companies and then left with a model that doesn't work. So this is about people who've been through the ringer stepping in to teach young entrepreneurs to scale up their businesses, to approach it the right way, how to ask for financing, how to hire the right people, all of that stuff. It's now giving them a helping hand because the ideas are not lacking. I see the ideas coming from females. It's fantastic. It's really, really fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's so exciting when you talk to some of the women we're supporting. This plethora of ideas and innovation, and they need the mentorship and the guidance that we as a foundation are giving, but they also need the investment, the money, right?
They need the money for sure.
And we, some bright people ought to see that this is where the future lies, because these are clever, smart women with brilliant ideas, and they need that support.
Tanya, one thing in the past, I never liked quotas, but now I'm saying to get the numbers to critical mass, we may have to push for certain percentage of funding or a certain percentage of women founders in your portfolio just to get a body of experience so you can build from that. If women are constantly going to be fighting for 2% of the VC funding, we'll never make it.
Yeah.
So we're going to
Yeah,
think
I changed
about
my
our
view on
natural
coaches
means. Yeah,
completely. Because you see that it's never, we've always said it will work out, but it never works out, right? So and with every other metric we say, we'll set a target.
that's right.
I've never had a finance director say to me, well, let's see how it goes. Right?
Exactly right. So I think
So,
we're going to have to set some milestones and targets.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that ambition, thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, Tanya, and I wish you all the best for a wonderful, wonderful conference, really.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.